Why is our beloved Prime Minister Sri Narendra Damodar Modi skipping the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia? Welcome, Swagatam, Jai Hind. At the outset itself, let me make it very clear that this is not a political analysis. This exercise or this attempt to make sense of what is happening has no ideological bias. It's clearly an attempt undertaken in humility and openness of mind with a commitment to truths to understand what's really playing out, especially in relation to those important developments that affect the present welfare and the future development of the country. When the Prime Minister chose not to attend the United Nations General Assembly session in New York, I shared some reflections with all of you. I hope some of you at least still remember my drift of thought. The present approach is not a repetition but a continuation of the same line of inquiry, because reflections of this kind are quite rare in the media at the present time. And I believe that it's extremely important that such material is put in possession of the thinking people in this country. Now, it seems to me that the main reason why Sri Modi decided to skip the ASEAN summit or to refrain from attending it is the presence of the American President Donald J. Trump. Unfortunately, the relationship between these two one-time bosom pals soured, and that goes back to Operation Sindoor. The contradiction of the claim by Donald Trump that he was mainly instrumental for bringing about peace between India and Pakistan in the wake of the outbreak of hostilities at that time. What has added to the embarrassment of our Prime Minister is not merely that President Trump repeated the claim at least 30 times thereafter, but also that the Prime Minister of Pakistan very explicitly stated in view of the global audience that the person who played the most important role in bringing about the cessation of hostilities was Trump. So here is one part of the conflict, or one party to the conflict, stating emphatically that peace was negotiated, at least cessation of hostilities was negotiated and settled by the President of America. And the other half of the other party to the conflict saying that he had nothing to do with it. And the person to whom the credit is ascribed or denied saying, yes, I did, and I'm the one who did it, saying not once, not twice, but 30 times. Now, clearly there is an embarrassment in this. And it seems the global community goes by what Trump has claimed, as attested by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Sharif, because it's a testimony of two against one, and therefore the view that Trump has taken will carry weight, which actually exposes the Prime Minister of India as one who shortchanged the truth, or one who lied to the global community. And this is clearly embarrassing. We still do not know what is the truth. I, for one, do not know what is the truth. There is nothing on paper, nothing in terms of convincing, clinching evidence that the version of my Prime Minister is utter falsehood. I don't have any evidence for saying this. I have no evidence for crediting the claim of Donald Trump. What I'm saying is, as far as the global audience is concerned, when it is 2 against 1, clearly the claim made by the two which is in contradiction to the assertion made by one, will carry weight. And this, of course, the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, my Prime Minister knows, and therefore I'm not at all surprised that he is thoroughly and unbearably embarrassed. But that's not the main point I want to share with you or discuss with you. What I want to submit to your consideration is as follows. Let us start with the fact, the ground reality, that our Prime Minister today faces a situation of global embarrassment. And that embarrassment is aggravated to no small measure by the fact that India today stands unbearably isolated on the global arena. We really have no friends in the world. And what is that due to? How has the situation come about? Given that in this very country, not long ago, 50, 60 years ago, we had a global leader called Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, whose leadership, whose viewpoint on various global affairs was respected, was listened to with respect. Nehru had a respect and commanded a credibility in the global arena, which is at stark contrast to the plight of our Prime Minister today. I know that nobody likes this comparison. In fact, the comparison that's being thrust upon us is that Nehru was a fool and an enemy of India's welfare, whereas the future of India and the present development of India is entirely in the hands of Narendra Modi. My humble submission is that it's all right to make tall claims, but there must be something on the ground in terms of hard evidence to authenticate it. Today we have reached a situation in which people are made to live in wishful thinking through the excessive unleashing of propaganda. A terrible confusion between appearance and reality is created. The genuine experiences of the people are discredited, and the official versions, which really have no connection to what people experience day by day, that's being thrust upon them. And individuals are forced to endorse those versions which actually run counter to their own experience. That's a terrible state. In simple terms, people are forced to live a lie. Now, this may be all right domestically, especially at a time when the state has acquired unprecedented technologies, means, and resources of control. And therefore, in the prevailing ambience of fear, people will not speak up their mind, or they will not contradict the official versions. That will work domestically, but that certainly will not work in the international arena. So, our Prime Minister today faces a very interesting situation. And I hope he gets to see this video, though I have very little reason to really assume that he will. But may my concern reach him somehow or the other. Because nobody in his inner circle will tell him this. And unless and until he understands realities of this kind, he will not be able to course correct. And I'm completely convinced, 100% convinced, that a course correction is needed, heavily, badly needed. And the refusal to course correct is tantamount to suicide, both individual and collective. That's the reason why I feel impelled to articulate these thoughts. Is not just a video in the usual sense of the term. This is a heart's cry that I'm sharing with every well-meaning, right-thinking Indian, at the top of which list I place Sri Narendra Damodar Das Modi. Now, what is the problem? The problem is that what has worked well for Sri Narendra Modi so far is now becoming heavily, terribly counterproductive. So what is it that has worked well for him? An atmosphere, a climate of opinion, an ambience was very deliberately and laboriously conjured up in this country of projecting Sri Narendra Damodar Das Modi as a larger than life character, as someone above even an old time epic hero, someone who is closer to God than to humanity. And this strategy worked so well that Narendra Damodar Das Modi himself began to believe in it and believe in it ardently. That's where the problem lies. Now, when you believe that you are a person of divine origin, you also assume that whatever you think, do, or say is 100% correct. And that makes you hostile to any criticism, well meaning or otherwise. You become intolerant of dissent. Not only that you become intolerant of dissent, but also that you become sanctimonious about it. You feel that the person who criticizes you is an enemy of truth, an enemy of God, because after all, you're an avatar of God. God's will is being manifested through you. And therefore, anyone who dares to criticize what you do or what you say is an enemy of God. And therefore, it's your righteous duty to crush him. This is where political intolerance, assuming a pseudo-religious character, becomes unbearably, destructively, suicidally intolerant. Now, what is the problem with this very artificial, subhuman condition? The real problem is that this takes a toll not only on the people, but also on the hero, on the demigod. And that toll must now be understood. It takes a toll on him in terms of the resilience and the flexibility or the adroitness of the spirit. For a leader, leading the destiny of 140 crores of Indians, this resilience, this flexibility, this creative genius of the spirit is of extreme, extreme importance. I cannot exaggerate the importance of it. Because it's only natural that if you are human, you err, you commit mistakes. And then the only sensible thing to do is to acknowledge the mistakes and to correct them. But if you believe that you are a divine manifestation and therefore infallible, you are not free to accept the fact that you have committed a mistake, and to that extent, you cripple yourself in respect to the freedom to course correct. You will insist on continuing the same path, and that path runs inexorably towards destruction and disarray. So most ironically, the flip side of this national cult, Modi-centric cult that's been created over the last 10 years, is that it has really crippled Sri Narendra Modi and robbed him of the freedom to recognize the truth. For example, the truth is that there is a difference between domestic perspective and global perspective. People outside the country are not obliged to lap up whatever is being claimed by us. They will insist on evidence. They will insist on proof of some kind or the other. Now, to take, for example, an offhand example, Sam Pitroda, in the wake of the famed, much touted Balakot attack, asked for some documentary evidence because he's a scientist. He said, my scientific training is not to believe every claim that is made, but to assume responsibility for what one accepts or what one comes to believe. And that means basing that belief on proof of some kind. Immediately, that demand was stigmatized as anti-national, and a hue and cry was raised against Sam Pitroda. Whereas the global community would see it as a very legitimate stand based on a scientific temper of mind. After all, in the Indian Constitution, Article 51A, it is stipulated that every Indian citizen has a duty, a patriotic nationalist duty to cultivate a scientific temper of mind. But today, if you cultivate the scientific temper of mind and adopt standpoints based on that, you will be stigmatized as an anti-national character, an urban Naxal, so on and so forth. Now, unfortunately, people who are in the business of manufacturing, there's a divinization of a political leader. They don't realize that the global community is very different. And what the Prime Minister facing today is the difference between the domestic attitude and the global outlook. Even today, in the domestic context, Sri Narendra Modi has every reason to claim himself to be an avatar of God, because that's how he is being treated, particularly those who are within the circle of Modi worship. And that includes the media. His writ runs. Every word that he says is heard with respect, irrespective of the merit of the content. I'm not saying that there is no merit, but I'm saying as a blanket statement that is a fact of the matter. So in such a situation, it is natural if the person concerned develops delusions of divinity, but people outside the country are not obliged to sign into that process of divinization, turning somebody into a god. There he will be assessed, judged, accepted or condemned based on facts. Now, unfortunately, because of this hard wiring of our Prime Minister's outlook, in this cult and ritual of national adoration for him, our Prime Minister has lost the capacity to face situations of dissent, difference of opinion, opposition to his will. And therefore, what's the problem? Now, please understand what I'm going to say. He has lost the ability to handle hostile situations or controversial situations. Domestically, you can crush a controversy. You can silence your opponent. You can throw him or throw them behind bars. But what will you do with people outside the country, especially those who are 10 times mightier than you? Then the only thing that occurs to a person in Prime Minister Modi's condition is to slink away from that. Don't come anywhere because I don't know how to handle this. I can handle anyone within the country, but I don't know how to handle a Trump. I don't know how to handle Shahbaz Sharif. I don't know how to handle anyone who thinks otherwise than I do. Now, this is a terrible state. This doesn't show ability, it shows disability. Now, what is true ability? When is a person's ability really proved? A person's skill, a person's genius, a person's authority is proved when he faces difficult and challenging situations and overcomes them. And what helps him in that process is not rigidity of mind, but the creativity of the soul. And what is creativity? Creativity is the ability to see a situation not only as it is, but also as it can be, and therefore the maturity to understand the given situation in terms of what is evident as well as what is hidden, and devise strategies on the basis of what is hidden, because most people go by what is obvious. And a person who actually sees a situation both in terms of the obvious and the hidden is far superior in terms of his spiritual mental capacities, his creative powers, than a person who sees the situation only in terms of the obvious. This anyone should be able to see. Actually, the real strength of the genius of India, the Indian mind, is this creativity. That actually accounts for the greatness that our thinkers achieved in the distant past. Unfortunately, we have lost our native strength. So today, because of our triumph, because of the BJP's triumph, because of attainment of power, in spite of the pretended attempt to promote Indian culture, what is animating us nationally, what is animating Indian politics and Indian administration, what is certainly animating the NDA outlook, is the rigidity of the Western mind. It's a Western culture, it's a Western mind that says either you or I. It is either or. The Indian genius never was either or. It was you and me plus something more. That was the expansiveness of the soul of India, which is completely lost. It is this flexibility of the soul that enabled India to remain intact spiritually, mentally, over a long period of political privation. The occupation or the subjugation of India lasting 1,000 years by forces from overseas, beyond our borders. We still remained intact in our soul. But today, after our attainment of independence, we have lost our soul. I know what I'm saying will not be popular, but I plead with you to understand as to what is happening to us, the psychology that is developing. There is something pathological about it. It's not a question of a party. All parties are being infected by the same spirit. Now, what Rahul Gandhi is trying to do, I don't know to what extent he will succeed in it, is to demonstrate the relevance of the flexibility of the spirit, which can only be exercised outside the rigid framework of the power structure. That's the reason why you often find him with ordinary people interacting with cobblers, with wayside dhaba people, with widows, with little children, and so on and so forth, all that you have seen for yourself. That is trying to present a picture completely counter to the context in which, say, Narendra Modi has ensconced himself, which, as I have already said, has taken a very heavy toll on him. Now, in this context, let me make a religious reference, and I'll stop with that. I know the time is already getting out of control. Think of Lord Krishna. Sometimes people who have no spiritual sensitivity make light-hearted references to his Leela with 16,000 gopikas. Now, this is not a question of Lord Krishna being a dandy or a fop. This is a symbolic statement in this. The contrast here is between the palace full of intrigue, palace represented by Kansa, the man of brutal authority who will not tolerate dissent, who will crush dissent, who will go to any extent, including killing an infant. That's one attitude to life. That's the attitude of either or, either you or I. Lord Krishna actually symbolizes the exact opposite. He says celebrating life is far more worthwhile than controlling life and controlling life with cruelty and brutality. So the choice is between brutality and love. And poetically, that love is being manifested in the form of Krishna's freedom with women, which has no sexual overtones, clearly no sexual overtones. And if anyone reads sexual overtones into that, it's because of his own depraved mind. And I fully endorse that pattern. We exaggerate the importance of these power centers. That's because we are blind to the beauty of life. Ultimately, it's life and life alone that counts. And unfortunately, I feel sorry for the Prime Minister because I feel that he is one who has forgotten to live. He has not lived his life. And he, of course, tries to project it as a great sacrifice undertaken for the sake of the country. When he says that, I sacrificed my family life for you, there was no need to do that. Who tells you that serving the country and having a relationship of love with your wife or your would have been children is inimical or mutually exclusive? That's a terrible misunderstanding. On the other hand, learning to love is a necessary preparation for becoming a leader of the country. Because ultimately, the leader of the country must distinguish himself as someone who loves the people as a father loves his children. It is that beauty of love, that flexibility of soul, that aristocracy of the mind that I feel is sorely missing from my Prime Minister. I wish him otherwise. I'm not criticizing him. I wish he could be different. I wish he could be free to be different. And until there is a change in, say, Narendra Damodar Das Modi's outlook and his personality, or in the words of Jesus Christ, unless he is transformed in this respect, achieving a foundational shift from the love of power to the power of love, I'm afraid This process of his alienation on the global stage will continue, and indeed it will be aggravated, and no strategy will help. What is needed is a foundational change, no cosmetic adjustment or fine tuning. And therefore, the present situation is extremely unhealthy and unhappy, not only for the Prime Minister as an individual, but for India as a country. This is a national issue, otherwise, I wouldn't have bothered to comment on it. Imagine President Donald J. Trump is at the ASEAN conference in Kuala Lumpur. My Prime Minister, the Prime Minister of the world's largest living democracy, is conspicuously absent. I can't think of a situation more pathetic, more painful as far as I'm concerned than this. May God bless India. Sabko Sanmadi De Bhagavan.